So next we're going to start on the cup. So I've pinned, I always keep these paper pieces here so that I can make sure I've got which side right and the point of breast matching on each side like that. So I've pinned together the satin pieces together like that. And then I always at the same time do the sheer cup lining piece at the same time, but that's going to be the reverse image like that with the seam on that way. So I stitch those two for the first cup now, and I just use a straight stitch. Now I don't usually do a forward back forward at the start because I find otherwise I get this wiggly line. So I'll start off with just holding those two threads at the back of the machine like I talked about, and I'll do just a few stitches with a 1.2 stitch length and then go back to the 2.4 and stitch all along here at that 6 mil, which is inside of where the basting stitches, go all the way to the end and finish that. And I'm going to do the same with this sheer cup lining and then iron those seams out, and I'll come back to you when I get to that point. So now I've stitched that and I've ironed that flat over the curve, or you can use a tailor's ham or a boob ham if you have one. I tend to use, I've got the sleeve board there. And I've ironed that. Now, as I said, be very, very careful about the sheer cup lining. I tend to iron that with the tip and not get the back of the iron on the sheer cup lining because it tends to otherwise melt sometimes. And then I've done exactly the same with the sheer cup lining, which is in the reverse, that's going to go that way. And now we're going to move on to attaching the upper cup. And I've just realised I should have hand basted this to the back because this is going to get sandwiched in between there. I was thinking something different, so that's going to get sandwiched in between there to create the enclosed seam. So I do need to hand baste this to the upper cup. So now I've hand basted that together. Next I'm going to pin the top of that to the edge there. Now I have just put a pin there where the notch is for the sake of this video. I tend not to do that because I don't find I need to, but I've done that for the sake of the video because that then goes where that seam is there. So you can pop that there and then work out from that edge. So I've pinned that one, this upper cup to that lower cup piece there, and you can see how that's come round a curve because I pinned the center, then here, and then pinned around the curve to get that to match. Now you could stitch that seam and then add the back. I tend to do it as an enclosed seam so that I'm going to pin the back on now, and I'll show you how I'm going to do that. So to enclose this seam, we're going to enclose the upper cup between the lining and the main fabric of the lower cup. So I'm putting this lining of the lower cup over the top, matching that seam there, and pinning. Likewise, again, pinning at the outer edge there. And then at the outer edge over here. And then redistributing those pins underneath. So now I've pinned all that, and you can see it comes out around a curve, and it's going to be sandwiching that upper cup between the two lower cup pieces. Again, I'm going to start with about a 1.2 here, stitch all across as a 2.4 and finish at a 1.2 at the end, and you can see I've left these threads hanging. I'm going to leave those threads hanging and then trim those off later. So I've trimmed off these threads here, and I've left these ones long at each end. You could trim and grade this seam. I have stopped doing that because I don't like to risk, it might make that, reduce the integrity of that seam. And also I don't actually iron this seam either anymore because I don't want to mark the silk. I just tend to finger press that down. And then I'm going to bring this cup seam together like that, so that both of those seam allowances are flat, and pin those edges together, and then that will be hand basted, and then we're going to move on to the power bar seam. So I've hand basted all around that edge. Now we're going to, we need to attach this front part, or the main power bar piece, to that side cup, and it's going to get in as an enclosed seam with this sheer cup lining. So this mark here is the, you can see this mark here is where the cup seam comes to. This mark here is the point of breast, just if you're wanting to make alterations later. So I've put a pin to mark that position there and there, which is where this seam is going to attach. Now you could use an erasable pen. I just tend to use a pin while I'm there, but you could use an erasable pen. The reason I don't cut into that is it will reduce the integrity of the lace, so that's why I don't cut a notch. You can see also here that this matches to there, and again I haven't marked that on the fabric or the lace, but you could. The main reason that's also there is that is actually comes across to the point of breast. So if you're wanting to alter the horizontal height or anything at any point, that's why I've left that there. So that position there is where that single notch was, as I showed you, and I put a pin there, and then I'm going to gradually pinning around the curve. So the best way to do this is to pin around the curve, especially to prevent a double boob effect later. And this has been drafted so that you can pin around the curve. It's not drafted to, that's the way it's been drafted. And you can see that I'm then, when I get to here, you can see that comes to, can you see that it's hard to show, but that point there is designed to finish at the same point on this one. So that is designed to finish. So it's designed to finish like that, which when you pin it like that, comes out like that. And then I'm going to walk my way up to the top. And the main thing for that is we want to have this matching exactly at the top of the lace there. So I'm going to actually pop a pin, oops, a straight pin, one that isn't bent, across there, so that we've got that nice line of the lace. This is why I actually look at that, see how that doesn't work. So I'm going to bring that down a bit. So that when you fold it out, it creates a nice curve. That's why I always check that with the pin in that exactly before I keep going. And then I'm going to move down that further. Again, pinning around the curve. Again, making sure here that I've got that lace matching when it folds out on that side. So we're sandwiching or enclosing this cup between the power bar lace part and the power bar sheer cup lining, which is going to attach on the back with that mark that we pinned at the top of that lower cup there. This sheer cup lining is going to match where the sheer cup lining was there. It doesn't extend up to the top of the power bar because you remember we cut that differently. And then keeping pinning all the way. Now it is easier to stitch this from the side of the sheer cup lining, so that's why I've switched my the side that I'm doing. I think you know what I'm trying to say. My brain is not going to work with what I was trying to say there. So I'm gradually replacing all of those pins to come out on that side. So now we're going to stitch this with a 1/4 inch seam. Now, as I might have said, I start this here. Don't do a forward back forward because you'll get a wiggly line. So start with a 1.3 stitch, then come back to your 2.4 and go right down to the bottom and go down to the 1.2. If, as I said, this will be inclined to otherwise try to want to go down, pull down to the needle plate. So pull your back threads straight through like that, and it should stop that happening. Just before I trim that seam, because I am really fussy, I usually just check that I've got this matching correctly, and then I'm going to pull through one of those threads so I can tie it off on the inside. So I'll get this a stitch, unpick, and then I'm going to just pull through that thread as a loop to get through to the other side, which I'm going to have to do without the camera. And once I've done that, I can pull both of those threads through and knot that off. I'd just rather do it that way because then it doesn't show on the outside and I'm so fussy. So that is tied off there, and then I can cut that. Next, if you, this is going to actually get that folded out that way, and that seam is a little bit too thick to show, but you want to be careful not to trim it back too much. So I usually trim it back to about 1/8 of an inch, but being very careful not to do much further than that. And then I do a zigzag over the top, and then I iron all that back, being very careful with my iron, and hand baste that down. So I'm going to come back to you after I've done that. So that is all done and ironed out. Now what I'm just going to do, you don't need to do this, but I just like to do this to be sure. I'm just going to put a couple of stitches here to hold that secure, to hold that seam allowance back, but more so particularly just to make sure, because that is kind of a point of tension and it's a tiny seam. So I'm just overcasting some stitches there just to make sure that that doesn't come undone. Just overcasting that edge, and then coming after I've overcast it a little bit, just a couple more stitches at the bottom there, just to make sure that that doesn't come undone or fray. And then after that's done, we're going to attach narrow clear elastic all along this line there. So you can see that I've actually got all that narrow clear elastic attached now, and it just goes across that seam there. You might notice I don't actually trim the ends of my threads here or that narrow clear elastic. I just find that it's easier to handle if I trim them off later when I get to the next seam. So next we're going to finish the other cup and move on to the frame, but I was just having a look because I just wanted to get an idea of how this one was going to look, because it's not a traditional vintage like I normally do. I just was trying to find some materials to make this particular set, because I just wanted to use this lace because I love it, from Emerald Erin, and so I was trying to coordinate a few colours that might suit the person I'm making this one for. So yeah, I think it's gonna turn out okay. I did think about putting a little bit of the blue in, but I think that's going to be too much, so I think I'm just going to stay with the red and that little bit of yellow. Okay, so I'm going to do the other cup and then come back to you and do the frame.